Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Today's episode is one of the most frequently asked questions I've been getting about exposing your pods and your services and your deployments inside of Kubernetes to the outside world. And rightfully so, it's a confusing subject. There are lots of different things, from services to virtual services to ingress controllers and service meshes. And how they all fit together, how they work together, and how they play together can be slightly confusing. So today's is the first episode of what's going to be a couple of episodes. This first episode, we're all going to do it on a local kind cluster, and it's going to be something that you can do and experiment with yourself. And I'm providing all of that code down below so you can pull it, you can run it, and it has all the steps right there for you to use. Then later on, we are going to do this in a cluster in the cloud, and we're going to apply some more advanced features like multiple ingress controllers and service mesh features, and explore how they are different and how they do different things and empower you to do different things, and why you want one or the other. So, and unfortunately, another thing that makes them confusing is there is overlap between the different things. So your ingress controllers and service meshes can do some of the same things. Just like your service mesh can do some of the same things that your network provider does. So if you use Cilium, it can do some of the same things that a service mesh can. So this makes all of it just slightly confusing, and I'm going to make a couple in this series to try to clarify some of the bigger pain points.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The No Channel.
So let's start with a service. In Kubernetes, you understand, here's a nice diagram. A service is something that exposes pods. So because how Kubernetes works, it could delete a pod and start it on another machine, or just on the same machine, on the same node, but it could have an entirely different IP address. And because of this, you can't necessarily list all the IP addresses in a load balancer. And this is where the job of a service comes in. Now, there's a couple different ways of exposing that service. That service can have a type of load balancer or node port, and there's some other ones. And to have a load balancer, you need something to provide load balancer. So most of the time, this is in the cloud. But we're not going to worry about this too much because node port works just as well. And you can expose your pods with just the bare service. You don't need to do anything more. So with this, with a service here, you can expose it with the node port and then hit it from any node with that node port. And you can actually, if you're here for Kubeflow, you can actually look for the Argo UI service and expose that via a node port and access it that way. So if you're getting confused with how to expose the service using Istio and whatnot, forget it. Don't do it. You probably don't need it if it's in a home cluster anyways. Just expose it with a node port, and now you're done. So this service object is our first basic thing to expose, but it has some limitations. So the service doesn't do everything for you. And so this is where ingress controllers come in. Most notably, services don't do any layer 7 filtering. So here is the OSI model layers 1 through 7. In general, unless you're a network engineer, it's not important to memorize each level, but level 7 is the highest, is going to be your HTTP web traffic. So this would be where like your headers are, your HTTP headers. And then the lower you go down, the closer you are to the machine, like the IP address or the MAC address. These are hardware things, and that's lower down. a lot of the times at the application layer, you don't care about these things. And so you can, quite frankly, forget that they exist. So a service doesn't care about these higher level things. And so if you're going to want to route based off of these higher level things, you're going to need an ingress controller. Now, there's a lot of things ingress controllers can do, and so we won't get into that. Today's example will give you an ingress controller, will enable it, and let you use it for these higher level things. One of the most classic things that you can do with an ingress controller is, let's say you had a domain called mydomain, and you wanted to add a shop to it, and you want it to be shop.mydomain.com. Now, your mydomain.com naturally goes to one app, and let's say you wanted shop.mydomain.com to go to another app. Now, with the classic service, this would be hard to impossible. It doesn't really know anything about that. And you would have two separate services, one for mydomain.com and the other one for the other pod that was shop.mydomain.com. So at this point, this is where a service no longer becomes useful because you need that higher level functionality. And the ingress controller provides this. Now, the next progression, once you have this store and everything, is logging metrics and some other things like authentication and JWT validation. So this is where then the ingress controller becomes insufficient. And like I said, there are some ingress controllers that provide more features than others, but this is kind of your classic service mesh. Service meshes also generally provide a API gateway implementation. And so when you're starting to need that, this is where the service mesh becomes more important. And you have things like Istio, which is a classic service mesh. And Istio wraps all of these things together and tries to provide them in one package. Now, Istio itself uses an ingress controller. You don't use Istio and get rid of it. Istio has its own ingress controller, but you can use multiple ingress controllers. So just because you use Istio doesn't mean you can't use another ingress controller. In fact, for my next video, when we're doing it in the cloud, we're actually going to use multiple ingress controllers, and you're going to get to see how that works and plays together. So for today, let's just do the simple example of first a service with a node port, and then we're going to do an ingress controller. Let's jump onto the computer. All right. So here we are. And this is what I'm probably going to touch it up a little bit for you guys. But this is basically what you're going to find. There's going to be just a few things. There's going to be two different apps here. There's going to be ingress, and this is the configuration file we're going to use to set up kind. First, I forgot to start Docker. Now, you can't be running with Cryo because kind is very Docker centric, so make sure you're running with Docker. All right, now, as you'll see here, we have these files. And what we want to do with them is we want to create a kind cluster. We are going to use this kind ingress YAML. Let's look over it, see what it does, but it's pretty simple. All right, so the first things that you're going to see here is this node label. And that is just the kubelet extra arg. So we want to wait for the ingress ready. And then what we're also looking for here is PAP port mappings from outside your cluster on localhost to inside your cluster. So what this is going to do is do localhost 80 maps to 80 inside, and 443 maps to 443. So basically what we're going to be able to do is hit localhost on our browser, and that is going to hit the ingress in our kind cluster. Cool. So all we have to do is create a kind cluster. I already have a kind cluster, so let's delete that kind cluster. If you don't give it a name, it's just going to create a cluster of type kind. You can actually have multiple kind clusters. Most of the time I don't. Now, when you're trying to use this config file, all you have to do, if you forget, you can do -h. And as you can see, it is config. And we're going to set that to kind ingress. All right. You want to use the double dash. All right. So as this is getting going, kind takes very little time to run. We're going to have a cluster, and we're going to have some ingress. Now there's a README file here. So if you get lost and just want to have some words up next to you, you can open up the README, and it has all the steps documented that you're going to need to follow. At this point, we can do k-get nodes. K is short for kubectl. It's an abbreviation. Type it a little bit faster. We can see that we're not ready, so there's no reason to rush. But let's look at some of the things that we're going to do. So let's look at this bar app while we're waiting for our cluster to get up and going. All right. So this is a HashiCorp echo server. All it does is echoes this text that we're giving it, which is just going to respond with my name. You can change it to your name or whatever you like. That's all that this pod does. So we make a pod, and we're also making a service. This file contains two things. They're very small, so it was going to be a lot of files if I kept it in a single file. All right. So, and this is the service we are using. And this is the default port used by the image. So this HashiCorp HTTP echo server. And we're giving it a selector. So our selector is bar. And that's this right here. Now, as you can see here, an interesting thing is we're not making this service as a node port or load balancer. So do you know what the default is? Pause right here and let me know if you know what the default service is, the type of service. Let's find out. Let's go ahead and get nodes. I'm sure it's up by now. It was probably up after 16 seconds. It does not take very long. Let's do k apply bar app. Remember the -f. I always forget the -f. And that's going to create the bar service. All right. One thing that we need to do before we actually do anything with ingress, this doesn't affect this. So actually, let's do this. Let's do k-get services. A cluster AP or IP service. That is this type we get. So we get this cluster IP. What can you do with this? Well, anything inside the cluster can access it. So if you made a foo service and you gave it this IP address, it could actually access that service from this IP address, but you have to be inside the cluster, not on the same network. I'm on the same network right now, and we can go here, but there will be nothing here. That is not what we need to do. I also apologize. I usually use i3, so I'm pressing random buttons, but i3 didn't want to play with OBS and Audacity at the same time for some reason, even though that's my normal setup, because OBS doesn't like to play with the compositor that is with the default thing here. So anyways, I'm hitting some random keys every once in a while because I'm usually using i3, but I couldn't do that today. All right. So we can't actually access this because we can't hit a cluster IP. But do you know what could? An ingress controller, because an ingress controller has a component that runs inside the cluster. So let's make an ingress controller now. We're just going to install the Nginx ingress controller. Like I said, there's a lot, but for right now, we're going to keep this simple. If you look at the README here, there is the ingress controller right here. And if you notice, this one is designed for kind, for the provider kind. So this one is designed to work for this. And we're just going to apply this to our cluster. There you go. There is a useful thing here. This is waiting on the Ingress Nginx. That's the namespace that's going to be created from that. So if you wanted to wait for it to be ready, you could just use this and sit here and wait. And if it takes over 90 seconds, it's going to get a timeout, but it doesn't take over 90 seconds. It's very fast, very snappy. Now that I said that, watch it take over 90 seconds. Done. All right. So see, 14 seconds. That was not bad at all. All right. So we have an ingress controller and we have an app that has a service. And that service, it's not a node port. Now we could change it to node port and we could access the service right now, but we don't really want to do that. We also have this foo app right here. Let's do the foo. Let's whatever. Words fail me every single day. All right. Let's go ahead and apply this. Apply -f foo app. All right. So now we have two apps and two services. So the foo service is exact same as the foo app. Let's go ahead and get them. So here we have the bar app, the foo app, the bar service, the foo service. Both are cluster IP. So if you forgot, cluster IP is the default if you don't tell it to be a node port or any of the other ones. So there's two other ones. There's node port, load balancer, and then the other one is external something or other. Maybe just external. If you want to know more about what the different types of services are, I'll make a video on that. That's an easy one to make a video on. That's an easy win. I'm doing that next time. All right. Not next time, because I actually have the follow-up to this one. So we're going to be doing that one next time. All right. Moving on. Now let's see what got installed with the Nginx. So in here, you can see that's the namespace. So we can do get all in ingress Nginx. And here is the Nginx ingress controller. And you have Nginx admission, Nginx controller. You have some services. Oh, look here. Ooh. Now this one is a node port. So you could actually access this via this node port. This could also be a load balancer if you were on a cloud. And that's what we'll be doing in the next video. All right. And you can look at through these. You have a deployment that's managing your pods. If you notice here, I didn't actually use a deployment to manage the pod because that was too much overhead for a simple task. But in actuality, you want a deployment with a replica set that's going to make sure that you have the right number of pods running. So don't let my bad practices leak into your Kubernetes cluster. All right. So I might make it a deployment now that I've said that, but you'll find out if you pull the repository. All right, so we have two apps running, and now we want to access them. Let's go ahead and go down here, open up Firefox, and if you remember right, we mapped localhost to our Kubernetes cluster. So we can do localhost. Look what we got. Now, this is exciting no matter what. Because if you understand what happened here, we got a response from Nginx. That means we hit our Nginx ingress controller and it responded with that it didn't find anything to serve. That's really cool. So what we want to do now is we could do a couple things, but this is what we are going to do. We want localhost app to take us, or bar to take us to the bar app. It's also not found now. And we want foo to take us to the foo app. And the really cool thing that is happening here is we are actually hitting two different applications, two different pods in your Kubernetes backend that build one larger app. And this is all about the microservice domain. So let's make this happen. If you remember correctly, and if you've been nosy, I have made this file for you guys, and this does all the ingress magic. But before we get to that, let's look at what this does on the backend server. So I apologize. This is quite a bit of information, and this is going to be quite a long video, but I want to give you guys all the technical things. I want you to walk out of here feeling like you learned something. So hopefully that is what will happen. All right, let's do this. We are going to open up another terminal. We're going to do k-proxy. You know what this is going to do? This is going to proxy our request to the API server. So now we can actually talk to the API server from here. Oops. All right, so let's go back over here. I accidentally hit Control C, so we're not proxying anymore. Now we're proxying again because, forgot the shift. And then every single time anytime I'm copying something out of a web browser, I hit the shift, and so then it opens up DevTools. Copying and pasting is the worst, even though it's like my primary job. All right, moving on. What were we doing? We're looking at the proxy. So we have a proxied request. So now we can do something like curl http localhost 8001. I copied it so I could paste it, and then I typed it out. I'm a moron. All right. Now, where do we go from here? If you don't know, you can just hit return, but we do happen to know. We're wanting to go to APIs. Now I don't remember. It is networking k8s.io v1. No, v1 beta, I think it is. Networking v1 beta. Yep. So there is a v1, but we don't want that one. So we're going to go here, networking v1 beta. And what you're going to notice is there is an ingress here. So ingress is a standard Kubernetes thing. It has an API endpoint. And basically what your ingress controller does is listen at this ingress controller. Now, the reason I wanted to do this before we actually got into it was, one, it gives you experience hitting the HTTP RESTful API, but you're also going to see this. Check this out. There are no items. So our ingress has nothing in it. It doesn't do crap. All right, let's fix that. Let's change that. We want it to do crap. We're going to apply this bad boy, and I'm not going to show you until after we have applied it. So let's do k-apply-f ingress. Boom. We've created ingress. All right, let's check out this right here one more time. Now, you're going to notice we have under the items, more items. We actually have items, and this is what we wanted to do. All right, so this is kind of hard to read. I wanted to show you because it's useful. It has a lot of information here and can be useful. The spec is really what we defined in the YAML up above, and we'll look at the YAML in just a second, but you can see we made some rules. We said the path foo goes to the foo service. on this port. And we said path bar goes to the bar service at this port. That was it. It's pretty simple. It's actually extremely simple. Let's look at that. Let's look at that file. And here is our file. Now, you'll notice here, I haven't given it its host name. You can actually define the host name. So if you wanted to do something with that, if you want to know why I didn't do it here, it's because we're going to do it in the cloud. And I'm actually going to run a website you guys can go to and is going to form the backbone of the community. So that's why I'm not doing it here. And for the most part, this is meant to be simple. It's already been a long enough video. All right, so let's see if it actually works. Bob's here. And Merrick. So if you remember, that's what we gave them. Let's look at the foo app. I don't know why I put the text as Bob's here. That's silly. And foo app. I don't know if it accepts spaces or not. And we can then apply that. Oh, actually, you couldn't do that because we can't update the start. So we could delete it. Delete. Sometimes it helps to spell. I deleted Ingress. Huh. All right. We're going to delete the foo app and the foo service. They're both defined in that. We're going to then reapply Ingress. As soon as this is done, we can also now turn off our proxy. You can also do proxy like this, where you do that, and then that will start in the background, but you have to remember to go back and kill it, and it's a security risk most of the time. I don't do that so that I make sure that I remember to kill it. The other thing that you can do here is provide it with a port. So if 8001 doesn't work for you, give it a port. K apply -f ingress, K apply -f foo app. Boom. Now let's go ahead and check out foo again. Foo app did it. So as you can see, we are now routing based off of layer 7 technology to the app that we want. And this is what you use Ingress controllers for. All right. That's pretty much it for Ingress controllers and services. So if you are doing this for Kubeflow, you want to look for the Argo UI service and you want to change it to a node port, and then you want to access that node port. That's all you have to do. It's that simple. That's all you have to do. All right. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope that you learned something with this, and I hope that you found it useful. If nothing else, just a refresher on why you might want to use an Ingress controller. Now, I know it wasn't very much of a deep dive. It was long enough as it was. So if you want to stay tuned, if you want to see the deep dive into Ingress controllers and service meshes, you're going to want to hit the subscribe button and stick around later to learn more about those. Those are coming in the coming weeks very shortly. I actually already have most of the material prepared for those, and it's just a matter of recording them and posting them. So I encourage you to hit the subscribe button, stick around to learn some more advanced topics, advanced routing procedures, and why you'd want to use some of these more advanced things in your production. All right. If you did not like these videos, I'm going to need you to do two things. First, rewatch this video at 1.25 times speed. The second thing I'm going to need you to do is hit the subscribe button stick around and see if these videos get any better.